A woman equals amen. And the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials, and it's 2021. Woo! We're so happy it's 2021. Again, I want to thank Christopher Hopkins, our assistant producer. And of course, I want to thank all of you for listening today. This is Mark Fisher, again, with Mark and the Millennials, and we're calling this podcast A Woman Equals Amen. And why are we saying that? Well, because in the United States Congress, the 117th United States Congress started with a prayer, and that, as it always does, and these are the newly seated congressmen and congresswomen in the 117th Congress, and they started with a prayer, and Congressman Cleaver gave the prayer in front of the 117th Congress shortly after they were sworn in. And he decided at the end of the prayer to say amen and a woman. You know how you end a prayer with amen, not like a man, plural, but you end it with amen, which means, hey, I agree, or actually, technically, it means so be it. Nonetheless, we have that clip, and we're going to talk about it, and here it is.
May the Lord make his face to shine upon us and be gracious unto us. May the Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace. Peace in our families, peace across this land, and dare I ask, O Lord, peace even in this chamber, now and evermore. We ask it in the name of the monotheistic God, Brahma, and God known by many names, by many different faiths. Amen and a woman.
So that is Congressman Cleaver saying amen and a woman. I mean, now we realize that our country is getting stupider, especially in the Democrat Party, because they're so terrified of offending anyone in their super progressive, crazy base that they can't even say a prayer and finish it with amen. They now have to say, yes, amen and a woman, even though the word amen doesn't mean and have any connotation whatsoever about a man or men plural. But that's what they decided to do. But that wasn't just the only thing. The House Democratic Caucus chairman, Representative Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat in New York, defended his party's proposed new House rules for the 117th Congress. So podcast listeners, for all of you that do not know, when you have a new Congress that is formed every 2 years in the House of Representatives, the majority party writes a rule book. They adopt a rule book. That rule book defines how the processes and procedures occur in the House of Representatives. So for example, the rule book could say something like, well, here's the proper way to address another member when you're on the House floor. And so that would be one rule. And the rules, of course, are changed whenever they want to be changed by the majority party. A lot of people don't realize that. So the majority party, in other words, defines and determines 100% what the rules are and what they say. And of course, in the 117th Congress, it is the Democrat Party that has a very slim majority. And that slim majority still being led by, of course, Nancy Pelosi. That slim majority decided that they were going to change the House rules. But this time, the rules had everything to do with amen and a women, just like what you heard in the prayer. So, House Democrat Caucus Chairman Representative Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat in New York, defended his party's proposed new House rules for the 117th Congress, specifically addressing new language that would replace gendered terms with more general ones. For example, if passed, the rules would replace terms such as mother, father, daughter, son, sister, and brother. So, let me say this again. These are the bad words. Mother, father, daughter, son, sister, and brother. Those words must go away out of the rule book. That is to say, you can no longer address people in that way on the House floor. And you must address genders with, instead, parent, child, and sibling. In other words, you can't, none of this he, she stuff. None of this mom and dad, father, daughter, none of this son or sister. No one really has a gender now on the House floor when they are debating. And these are the rules. They're actually telling you that you must constrict your free speech and not call people by their biological identity of being a man or a woman. Instead, you must use child and sibling or parent. Can you believe this? So examples of other terms include the replacement of the word chairman, like the chairman of a committee, or chairwoman of a committee, with chair, like that thing you sit on, and seaman with seafarer. I'm not sure how often you would use the word seaman on the House floor, but apparently when you do use the word seaman, you must instead say seafarer. No, I'll leave that one there. From my standpoint, the gender-neutral language is just consistent with an effort for the House and the best tradition of the House to reflect the gorgeous mosaic of the American people in the most sensitive fashion possible, said Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat of New York. He further told reporters, when asked about the language, and the House, of course, is designed to be he says, the House is designed to be the institution closest to the American people to reflect the hopes, the dreams, the aspirations, the fears, the concerns, the anxieties, in the words of the framers, the passions of the American people, according to Hakeem Jeffries. With all due respect, Congressman Jeffries, I don't think the founders of this great country would want to eliminate gendered pronouns such as father, daughter, son, sister, brother. I don't think they'd want to do that because they actually believe that, a man was a man and a woman was a woman, and they had different body parts and they were biologically different, just because that's the science. So in response to Hakeem Jeffries' statement and to all of these term changes in the House rules of the 117th Congress, Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader, tweeted on Friday, he said, this is just stupid. He said, this is just ridiculous. That was his blunt reaction. And he said, and he signs it, I'm a father, a son, and a brother. So he's like sticking it right in their eye. Look, podcast listeners and ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you something. We, the people, have to start standing up against this stupidity because initially it all seems funny, because it is initially funny, and it all seems harmless, but it actually is quite harmful because this is the party, the Democrat Party, that thinks it's okay that a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old can actually be a gender different from what they were assigned at birth. And that they should, more importantly than the first thing that I said, that they can and should be able to take all the different kinds of therapies to change their gender at that early part of their age. It's, quite frankly, that's child abuse and it's disgusting. And this is where it's not funny. So these are the people that always seems kind of like, it's just kind of harmless, they're just crazy, let's just go with it. No, we shouldn't go with it. As conservatives, we should just put our foot down and say, it's pretty obvious, guys. Men have penises and women have vaginas. It's pretty straightforward, right? Pretty straightforward. And they're biologically different because one can reproduce and actually carry a baby and have a child, and one cannot. And that's just the way it is, whether we like it or not. Can you call yourself what you want? It's a free country. Go for it. But at the end of the day, is that the best way forward for the House rules for the 117th Congress? I don't think so. And neither does Kevin McCarthy. So good for you, Kevin McCarthy, for just saying it the way it is, that this is stupid. So if that isn't enough with the 117th Congress, the House Dems, when they said amen is a woman, well, Steny Hoyer is the House Majority Whip. So you have Nancy Pelosi, then you have Steny Hoyer. So Steny Hoyer said that he was upset that the House Democrats and Republicans, the members of Congress and the House of Representatives, that they didn't get a cost of living adjustment. In other words, they didn't get a pay raise. And this was part of the coronavirus stimulus bill that was removed, and he's really upset about that. So he literally is beating his chest. We have the video and a clip on this. You really have to hear this to understand how out of control the Democrat Party is, because they're so concerned about how you live your life and how you call your mother or your father, and they're so concerned about getting involved in your personal lives, even though they say that they're not. And in addition to that, it shows you they're also all about themselves, about giving themselves a pay raise. So we have that clip from Steny Hoyer, and here it is.
Members are going to be underpaid in this bill, too. We beat our chest, and we have money in there that says we don't get a COLA. One more time. Aren't we so courageous? I'm disgusted by that, Mr. Speaker. I want all of America to know. I want all my constituents to know.
So that's Steny Hoyer, number 2 man in the House of Representatives. He's a Democrat from Maryland. He's, I think, 81 years old, maybe 82 years old. He's certainly over 80, okay? He's been in office his entire adult life, and he's all about being in office for the money. And there he is, you see it and hear it in your own words, saying, as he's beating his chest, that he's proud that he's asking for more money for the members while you're out there and your businesses are shut down, or you've lost your job, or you're on unemployment. I mean, talk about out of touch. Not only are they out of touch talking about amen and a woman, they're out of touch because they want to give themselves a pay raise. So, next up, in the same segment here, we have, to show you how out of control things are, here's Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy talking about Nancy Pelosi getting reelected. And he talks about how close her election is in becoming the House Speaker, the Speaker of the House, again. And she did. She got reelected, but just barely. By just barely, if you don't look at just the raw numbers, because obviously there are plenty of people that voted for her that were just afraid they had to vote for her, but they were really ready and willing to jump ship at any time and vote against her. But naturally, if you're a Democrat, they're all about the money. And Nancy Pelosi, let's face it, can raise a lot of money from Silicon Valley. And that's how she keeps her members in line, and she keeps getting reelected as Speaker of the House. Well, there's also another reason why she got elected, and it actually is directly related to Congressman Eric Swalwell. We have a clip on this, and here it is.
For every single Democrat that voted for Nancy Pelosi, they voted to put a person back on the Intel Committee, Swalwell, who has been with the Chinese, only because she could not remove that person because she needed his vote for Speaker.
So that's Congressman Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy from California talking about the reason why Nancy Pelosi kept Eric Swalwell, the congressman, who obviously has been badly tarnished and tainted with the Chinese spies, who's, by the way, whom he's sleeping with. They kept him on the Intel Committee because Nancy Pelosi, if she were to take him off, he probably would not have voted for her. And she needed his vote in order to become the Speaker of the House. Can you believe this? I mean, this is insane, folks. It's insane. But this is who's running the House of Representatives. First, amen equals a woman. And then you got, of course, Steny Hoyer talking about how they, the congressmen and women, deserve a pay raise. And he thinks that that's normal during the time of economic collapse in the United States from the pandemic. And then you have Nancy Pelosi, who keeps a spy and a crook, Eric Swalwell, on the Intel Committee because she needs his vote, even though he's already sold out to the Chinese government. Unbelievable. And that is House Dems say amen equals a woman. Next up, we have the Facebook empire strikes again. That's right, the Facebook empire strikes again. So what does that mean? Well, you'll love this. You'll love this, as in, you know, more 2020 crazy stuff, even though it's officially now 2021. Facebook has removed the 1.7 million member group, Joe Biden is not my president. So there's a Facebook group called Joe Biden is not my president. It has 1.7 million members. And Facebook removed it, just eliminated it. Now think about this. 1.7 million people liked and joined the group, Joe Biden is not my president, and they did it in the matter of a couple of months. Technically, less than a couple of months, probably 6 weeks. And it's just a massive group. And Facebook was so intimidated by this group, and they're so intimidated, the snowflakes that work at Facebook, by the free speech of these individuals who are not happy with the outcome of the election and believe that there was massive fraud. There are so many people that believe that, and Facebook was so upset with this group that the snowflakes didn't even give them a warning. They just removed the group. They literally just removed them from Facebook altogether. No explanation, because, when you're Facebook and when you're, a monopoly, and when you're a tech monopoly, and when you don't believe in free speech, you can just do whatever you want. And if that's not enough, there's a race in Georgia, and that race will be decided, ironically, today, right? Hopefully today, unless it's a typical race by Democrats where they continue to count until they win. But there is a race today in Georgia, and you have Facebook, which several days ago stopped the ability of Senators Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue from operating their Facebook pages. And not just fundraising, but also actually promoting their Facebook pages to market their campaigns. So here's what it says. And this is from the Epoch Times, but it's also, by the way, in multiple news sources. You won't find it in the New York Times, and you won't find it in the Washington Post. Obviously, you're not going to find it in those papers. But nonetheless, we have it for you, and it is in a number of other papers. And here's what it says. Facebook shut down a fundraising page for Senators Kelly Loeffler, Republican Georgia, and David Perdue, who's also Republican from Georgia, just days before voters head to the polls to decide between the Republicans and their Democrat challengers. The National Republican Senatorial Committee runs the Georgia Battleground Fund, a joint fundraising committee with the NRSC and the campaigns for Loeffler and Perdue. According to a screenshot from the committee, Facebook alerted them that the page for the fund was disabled for policy violations. This is before the election, right? 5 days before the election. The page allegedly violated a policy against unacceptable business practices. Doesn't that sound like very Soviet to you? I mean, it sounds like very authoritarian. Unacceptable business practices. We're not going to tell you what they are. We're just going to say that there was a policy violation and the practices are unacceptable. Here's the quote. "We don't allow ads that promote products, services, schemes, or offers using deceptive or misleading practices, including those meant to mislead or scam people out of money or personal information," the alert said. Oh, sure, says the company that does nothing but steal your data and use it manipulatively and then sell it to advertisers. We don't allow you to promote products or services or schemes using deceptive or misleading practices, including those meant to mislead or scam people out of money. I mean, that's what Facebook business model is. I mean, really, that's their whole business model. So a Facebook person told news outlets that what happened was a mistake. Yeah, so big tech is at it again, said the National Republican Senatorial Committee in a statement. This is unacceptable. We only have 4 days to Election Day, and they have shut us down. But Facebook responded, well, actually, we didn't mean any of that stuff that we said. It was actually a mistake by the Facebook personnel, which meant, by the way, it was too late by then, right? Because 4 days before the election, Facebook shuts you down. It takes you a day or two to get a response from Facebook of, what happened? What did you do? Why did you do it? And then by then, Facebook says, we made a mistake. It's too late, by the way. It's election day. No longer matters. And that is the game of big tech. It's the whole game of big tech. It's to do whatever they can to try to stop anyone who has an R behind their name from getting elected. And this is more proof that there must be changes in legislation that properly regulates Facebook and properly regulates Alphabet, which is Google and YouTube, without question. We all know that. And of course, Twitter too. And I'm not just picking on these guys. It should be anybody in the social media space. Because if you are relying on promoting your campaign on Facebook, and so is the other side that you're running against, but they're only shutting down the one side, that's a de facto campaign contribution to your opponent, which means it's a violation, of course, notwithstanding the violation of free speech. So that's the Facebook empire strikes again. So get this, podcast listeners. Chuck Todd fails at Senator Johnson hit job. That's right. So NBC's Chuck Todd, he's all about basically doing hit jobs against Republicans. That's NBC, and that is Chuck Todd. Everybody knows it. So Chuck Todd is interviewing Senator Johnson from Wisconsin, and he asks Senator Johnson a series of questions. We have the questions and the responses from Senator Johnson, and we really want you to listen to this because this really tells you not just about Chuck Todd and NBC and how crooked they are, but in addition to that, it just tells you what the media thinks about freedom of speech, the Republican Party, and transparency in elections. This is important stuff, okay? So here's Chuck Todd. He says, there are so many cases that have been filed about, election fraud and so forth, but there haven't been any successes. In other words, there's no fraud. So we have that clip, and here it is.
There have been 57 cases filed by the president or his allies. Not a single court has found a single instance of fraud or any of this evidence seen as legitimate. So what has changed to suddenly put you on the side of questioning the results of this election, sir?
So that's the question. Fair question. Okay, that's fine. That particular question is fair. Here's Senator Johnson's response. We have that clip, and here it is.
To answer your question, I would ask that all your listeners, ask our critics to actually read the letter. One of the points we make is that we are not acting to thwart the democratic process. We're acting to protect it. The fact of the matter is that we have an unsustainable state of affairs in this country where we have tens of millions of people that do not view this election result as legitimate. We've just come off of 4 years where the other side refused to acknowledge the legitimacy of President Trump. And here we are again. And what we're saying is we need transparency.
And that's Senator Johnson responding to Chuck Todd's question of, hey, there haven't been really any successes in going to court with these election fraud cases. So therefore, Senator Johnson, why are you objecting in the Senate to the election of Joe Biden? Why are you doing that? And okay, so the first question is certainly fair enough, but it doesn't really give the full breadth of what has happened, which is the courts haven't really accepted the cases, right? They've dismissed them without actually hearing any evidence whatsoever. And because, as we've said ad nauseum on this program, you had hundreds of lawsuits prior to the election whereby Democrat operatives changed election rules and laws in the middle of the election while people were literally voting or right prior to people voting, which of course is wrong. But naturally, NBC's Chuck Todd doesn't want to talk about that. No. So here's Chuck Todd saying, you're just full of allegations. Just all you have are allegations, Senator Johnson, nothing else. We have that question and comment first, and then we're going to give you Senator Johnson's response. Here's the clip.
Because what you're alleging is essentially you and your colleagues have created this controversy. So right now we are locked into a destructive, vicious circle in some ways, as you kind of outlined, which is you made an allegation that there was widespread fraud. You have failed to offer specific evidence of that widespread fraud, but you're demanding an investigation on the grounds that there are allegations of widespread fraud. So essentially, you're the arsonist here. President Trump is the arsonist here. You've started this fire, and now you're saying, whoa, look at this. Oh, my God. All these people believe what we told them because you didn't have the guts to tell the truth that this election was fair.
Isn't that incredible? So that, ladies and gentlemen, is NBC's Chuck Todd having absolutely no interest in getting to the bottom of why the American people, so many millions of the American people, are distrustful, I should say, of this election. And the fact that they believe there was massive amounts of fraud that occurred at many different levels. And so is Chuck Todd interested in talking about any of those specific cases? No, instead he just says to Senator Johnson, you're an arsonist. In other words, he's trying to burn the whole house down. Can you imagine? This is the network that is actually saying that after 4 years of Donald Trump. Well, we have Senator Johnson's response. Pretty awesome, and here it is.
Chuck, this fire was started back in January of 2017. People like Mark Zaid, in his tweet, the coup has started, first of many steps, rebellion and impeachment to follow ultimately. This was started when the mainstream media dropped any pretense of being unbiased and actually chose sides during this election. This fire was started when you completely ignored, for example, our investigation of Hunter Biden. No evidence of wrongdoing there, and now we find out after the election, no, there is a fair amount of evidence to the point that we have a real FBI investigation.
Senator,
so
all right, I've had enough of hearing this.
Listen, I've had enough of this too. It's the
Senator,
bias in the media that has created a situation where Republicans and conservatives do not trust the mainstream media, and that is what has destroyed the credibility of the media and our institutions, and really
the destruction
shaken confidence
of
in
the
this election result. So I didn't start this.
You're hearing Chuck Todd is just like, I've had enough, Senator. I don't want to hear this. So, and you have, what is he that he doesn't want to hear, Chuck Todd? He doesn't want to hear Senator Johnson talking about the fact that, hey, look, you guys at NBC wouldn't even report anything about the Hunter Biden story prior to the election. In fact, you still aren't reporting anything about the Hunter Biden story. And why haven't you done that? And I mean, you're just crooked, right? And instead of Senator Johnson attacking NBC directly, he's just talking about mainstream media. And I think that's, very gentlemanly, right? Because I'm not really sure I'd be able to be that gentlemanly. I think I'd have to just go after right after the neck of Chuck Todd and NBC about how crooked they are and have been, not just with the Vice President Biden's son, not just with his son, but also with the entire way they've conducted themselves through the 4 years of Donald Trump's presidency and through the actual election, and currently where they're saying, we don't really want to hear about any kind of allegations. Oh, by the way, but you're not telling us any allegations. But we don't want to hear about the allegations. In fact, I don't want to hear any of that anymore. I mean, can you imagine? This is what NBC, this is one of their best anchors at NBC, allegedly, Chuck Todd. So here's Chuck Todd offended about election transparency. Think about this. Election transparency, the most single important thing in being able to preserve and restore our republic. And Chuck Todd is offended by it. And we have that clip.
You've used your committee to sort of create the illusion of voter fraud, as you just described earlier, because there are, quote, allegations. I'm just trying to understand here, what are you doing it for? You're not trying to overturn the election, you just said. Are you simply trying to curry favor with constituents of the president's? Is that what this is all about? Is this a cynical political ploy?
I'm trying to be transparent. One of the things we found out in our hearing is, the basic allegations kind of fall into three categories. I would say the first is the either violation of or lax enforcement of election law. There is voter fraud. There always is. We had one witness talk about 42,000 people voting twice in Nevada. The other issue
just
really
because
is
you
the
have
fact
somebody
that
say it didn't make it true.
It's easy.
Senator,
it's
none
easy.
of these allegations. Stop. You don't get to make these allegations that haven't been proven true.
Can you imagine? This is a major TV anchor, news anchor, saying, "Stop. You can't talk. I mean, we don't want you to tell us more about allegations, if you will, about fraud, about cheating, about massive cheating, about collusion with the Biden campaign and with Democrat operatives in literally stealing the election, potentially in certain states." I mean, and I use that word potentially because of the fact that you do have to provide definitive proof. Okay, well, to be fair here, Ron Johnson, senator from Wisconsin, was trying to do just that. He was trying to at least give a single example, given the time constraint on Chuck Todd's program, because obviously, you could talk about it for hours, I'm sure, but given the time constraint of maybe just a few minute interview, he was trying to start giving some of that information. What does Chuck Todd do? He says, no, stop, I don't want to hear it. I don't want our viewers to hear what you have to say either. Incredible, right? And this is where we are. This is where we are in American politics in 2021, at the beginning of 2021. We have millions upon millions of Americans who don't have trust in our system. We have Ron Johnson, who's a true patriot, who's trying to restore transparency and restore faith in our voting system. And then you have tools like NBC's Chuck Todd, who isn't the least bit interested in getting to the truth. And instead, he says, no, I don't want to hear any more of this. So that is Chuck Todd fails at Senator Johnson hit job. Next up, podcast listeners, we have California must recall and replace Lockdown Newsom. That's right, California must recall and replace Lockdown Gavin Newsom. So, recalling Governor Newsom is picking up some steam, and everybody knows it. We have ABC 10 News, who frames the recall issue. And they're also interviewing Randy Economy. That's the guy's name, Randy Economy. He's the founder of Recall Gavin 2020. And we have a clip on that, but before we have the clip played, I just want to set this up and let you guys know that the people of California have had it with Gavin Newsom because of the massive amount of crime that is occurring in the state, the declining standard of living for the average Californian, and in addition to that, the lockdowns, which are, quite frankly, idiocy at this particular point in time. Because everybody knows what their unique situation is if they want to stay home or if they want to go out. But Gavin Newsom doesn't care. And of course, it didn't help Gavin Newsom that after he locked everybody down, he went out and had a dinner that cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars, of course, in the rich wine country of California, while everybody else had to be locked down. But nonetheless, here's ABC 10 News framing the recall issue and interviewing Randy Economy, the founder of Recall Gavin 2020. Even though it's 2021, they're still trying to recall him, of course. We have that clip, and here it is.
Governor Newsom has already faced a handful of recall efforts during his time in office, but all of those failed before they ever reached voters. The people behind this latest effort tell me they have the support they need to succeed.
He's done this to himself.
Randy Economy, the senior advisor to Recall Gavin 2020, says the governor's mismanagement of business shutdowns during the pandemic is the driving force behind their effort to oust him.
More people have suffered who are the heart and soul of California and the backbone of our economy. And we basically have had it and said, now is the right time for the recall.
So this is important, right? Because you heard the framing of the Recall Gavin issue. And it's important because this is entirely possible now that Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, could not only be recalled, but obviously lose in the recall election. And so I would love to see that. I know all of you out there would love to see that. By the way, you know what's interesting? Even independents and Democrats in California would love to see that. I am convinced, and it's entirely possible, that Californians could say, you know what? By Californians, I mean many of the Democrat Californians and the progressives might just hold their nose and say, I'm actually going to vote for a Republican governor because, hey, that guy Gavin Newsom's just so awful. I'm going to hold my nose as a Democrat and do that. I think that's entirely possible. Well, here's Fox business anchor David Asman. He's a business anchor on Fox News interviewing former San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer, okay? And he wants to know, hey, is it the governor's pandemic policies that are causing the recall efforts? Well, obviously, that's the primary reason, but there are a lot of other reasons as well, which we will go into. So we have a clip on this interview from David Asman interviewing San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer, and here it is.
Is it the pandemic itself and the arbitrary rules, and as you say, not many of them not following the science, that the governor's been involved with? Is that really what pushed many over the edge in calling for a recall?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that, and I also think it's the hypocrisy that we've seen from the governor. But I also think, again, there's so many other issues. For example, homelessness continuing to skyrocket in so many cities across California. Here in San Diego County, we were the only region where over the last 2 years, homelessness actually went down by double digits. So I think it's time to bring a change, somebody who can actually make a difference, get this state back. We need a California comeback, and we need it soon.
That sounds like a great soundbite to me. We need a California comeback, and we need it soon. And that's San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer talking to David Asman of Fox Business Anchor. I mean, just brilliant. I mean, it's entirely possible that this is the guy that could replace Gavin Newsom. And as I said, it's also entirely possible that independents and folks who are progressive Democrats, it's possible they might actually hold their noses and vote for Kevin Falconer because they're like, hey, it just can't get any worse than where we are now with homelessness, joblessness, shut down businesses, the lockdown, massive amounts of crime, and needles on the street everywhere, a California poop patrol. I mean, the first state ever to do that. I mean, how disgusting is that? Tells you everything you need to know about where the state is headed. So David Asman of Fox News asks, how about all the companies leaving California? Look, if you ever want to hear a great framed argument of why we should elect Kevin Falconer as governor of California after we recall Gavin Newsom, Kevin Falconer, the former mayor of San Diego, does just a terrific job framing why he should be governor. And we have that clip. Listen closely. Here it is.
The strength of the economy of any state, and particularly here in San Diego, is our small businesses, our medium-sized businesses, and of course our large businesses that create literally tens of thousands of jobs. And to see that flight that has been occurring out of our state, it's unacceptable. We need a governor that recognizes we want you to be located in California. We're going to actually cut regulations to make you successful, particularly as we get on the other side of this pandemic, to put Californians back to work and not have the attitude that says all these companies can leave and it's okay. It's not okay. We need to change that dynamic. And that's something that I think folks are ready for a change, and Californians are ready to get back to work safely.
Exactly. It's not okay that these companies are leaving. And yet the arrogance of Gavin Newsom and the Democrat Party is, oh, we're in California. We make new businesses and create new businesses every day, including these big tech giants and all of these technology companies. I mean, we don't care if we lose some of these businesses to Texas or to Nevada or to Arizona. We don't care. We're California. And Falconer's going, you know what? The problems are much greater than that now because the exodus of these businesses of all different sizes, it's actually accelerating. And since it's accelerating, we should also look at the fact that if we had more of these small businesses here, if we lifted the lockdowns, then we wouldn't have as much homelessness because more people would be actually working in the workforce. I mean, folks, this is just such easy, simple stuff, right? But isn't it amazing? It requires Kevin Falconer, a former San Diego mayor who happens to be a Republican, just to kind of like bring some common sense back to the state of California and back to the debate of what California needs to do in order to recover. Because right now, California, in as much as it is still collecting, record amounts of revenue from these big high-tech businesses and so forth in Silicon Valley, doesn't change the fact that the rest of the state is completely in trouble. And so if you want to, look, podcast listeners, if you want to see and hear the real difference between the way a great state is run and the way you can run a great state into the ground, you have to hear Governor DeSantis of Florida, okay? So Newsom, of course, Governor Newsom of California, he's all woke and he doesn't really want to do the right thing. I actually think Newsom knows what the right thing is, but he's terrified of doing it because he wants to be president of the United States. So instead of doing the right thing for a state and just leaving office and being happy that he did the right thing, no, he wants to be president. So he has to do whatever the far left progressives tell him to do. But not Governor DeSantis. Governor DeSantis, who's the governor of Florida, okay? In contrast to Newsom, DeSantis in Florida, he hasn't locked down his state. You want to know how I know this? Not just because of what I read. I was just there, podcast listeners, okay? I was in Florida, okay, just last week, and I was there for, 7-8 days, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it. And I'm there in Florida because I wanted to see. I went there because I wanted to see with my own eyes what it looked like as compared to what I was reading about Florida. And guess what? What I was reading is 100% true. Florida is open for business, and I mean open. The restaurants are completely open, completely. The streets are open. People are outside walking. You can go anywhere in Florida. By the way, the nightclubs are open in Florida. The nightclubs are open. We went to this one place that had a series of restaurants. It was kind of like a restaurant row, and there were a couple of like nightclubs, and there were semi-indoor, semi-outdoor. and they were just packed with people. And I know that if you're from a place like California, or if you're from a place like Maryland, your first reaction would be, oh my gosh, those people are terrible. They're going to spread. It's like a super spreader event. That's what, of course, the far left always says, because they want to completely and utterly control your life. And of course, people like me and others like me, including Governor DeSantis in Florida, say, you know what? Then don't go to those places. Don't go. Don't let anyone in your house that tells you that they are going to those places. If you're that fearful about just living your life, don't go. All right? Pretty simple stuff. Take more precautions, but let those people live their lives. That's exactly what Florida has done under Governor DeSantis, ladies and gentlemen. And if that isn't enough, Florida is accelerating the vaccine to the elderly and to nursing homes, because Florida has a massive elderly population, obviously, because so many people retire in Florida. Makes perfect sense because the weather is terrific. So we're trying to draw this contrast and this compare and contrast between Florida and California and between their two governors, because the weather is similar. All right? I mean, let's face it, California has terrific weather. Florida does too. Weather is similar. The environments are beautiful, no doubt about that. But the governing style is completely polar opposite. So Governor DeSantis, of course, gets all these vaccinations. He's rolling out the vaccinations to make sure that first responders and the elderly get the vaccinations first. They get the COVID vaccination first. And naturally, the press plays gotcha with the governor in a press conference. And in that press conference, the governor is actually at, I believe, a nursing home talking to many leaders in the elderly community and the retirement community. And naturally, the press plays gotcha because they're like, well, Governor DeSantis, when are you going to get vaccinated? You're going to get vaccinated like real soon? And DeSantis does such an amazing job, because this is what you want to hear from your governor. And I got to tell you something, when you hear DeSantis say it, you know it's true, because this is the guy that has, the third largest state in the country, I think, after Texas, and in terms of population, and yet it's completely and utterly open. And so he does what he says he's going to do, which is very unique in politics. And he also does what he says he's going to do when it comes to vaccinations. So they try the hit job. Well, Governor DeSantis, you're going to take the vaccination. And he has a great response. We have that clip, and here it is.
No, so what I've said is I'm willing to take it, but I am not the priority. They're the priority. I'm under 45. And so the people under 45 are not going to be first in line for this. And so when it's my turn, I will take it. But this is who I want to be vaccinated. I want my parents, our grandparents, to be able to get it. And, granted, I'm an elected official, but whoop-de-doo. At the end of the day, let's focus where the risk is.
So he gets a standing ovation, of course, from his elderly audience and his retired audience about, this is great. Here's a politician who's actually saying, look, I'll take the vaccination when it's time for me to take the vaccination, but I'm not in a hurry to get it because there's so many other people who are a priority before me. And who cares? Whoop-de-doo, I'm just a politician. Doesn't mean that that I should just get it because I'm a politician, the vaccination, before everybody else. Makes perfect sense. But of course, didn't change the fact that the press was trying to play gotcha with that. And then he moves forward and he lays out very clearly who should get the vaccination. And it's going to be happening in Florida, that they're going to do a great job in Florida in getting this rolled out. Compare that to Gavin Newsom, right? Compare that to Newsom. In California, they can't even roll out the vaccine and decide who's going to get it because they've turned it into a political issue rather than a science-driven issue. And that is on top of all of the other problems that California has. This guy, Gavin Newsom, when I see him, podcast listeners, I just see a pretty boy. That's what he is. He's like this pretty boy Californian, grew up with a lot of money, spent his days on the beach growing up, great life, doesn't really care much about you, just cares about staying elected, and that's what he has to do to please his left-wing, supporters. So that's a great compare and contrast between Governor DeSantis of Florida and Governor Newsom of California. And that is, California must recall and replace Lockdown Newsom. Next up, podcast listeners, we have the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up, Mr. Assistant Producer? Of course. Here it is. And it's the dumbest bill in America. And it is out of the state of New York. And the dumbest bill in America is forced COVID detention camps in New York. Yeah, you heard that right. Forced COVID detention camps in New York. So, New York may legalize forced COVID removals from your home. They may legalize that. You get COVID, and they decide in New York, we're going to remove you from your house, and we're going to detain you somewhere where we put you. We're going to just put you over there, and we're going to detain you over there because we can. The bill allows New Yorkers deemed a public health risk to be detained. New York Assemblyman Nick Perry from New York City introduced Bill A416, which has to deal with forced COVID removals from your house. I'm going to read a section of this bill for you because you have to, I want to be fair, okay? Whenever we do the dumbest bill in America, we try our best to read actual sections from the bill so that you can understand that we are in no way creating any kind of hyperbole about the bill. The bill says what it says. So here's A416, State of New York, in the 2021 and 2022 regular session in the New York Assembly from Nick Perry. Introduced by him, and it says, the public health law is amended by adding a new section, so forth, as follows. Removal and detention of cases, contacts, and carriers who are or may be a danger to public health. Other orders. The provisions of this section shall be utilized in the event that the governor declares a state of health emergency due to an epidemic of any communicable disease. Upon determining by clear and convincing evidence that the health of others is or may be endangered by a case, contact, or carrier, or suspected case, contact, or carrier of a contagious disease that, in the opinion of the governor, after consultation with the commissioner, may pose an imminent and significant threat to the public health, resulting in severe morbidity or high mortality, the governor or his or her delegee, including but not limited to the commissioner or the heads of local health departments, may order the removal and or detention of such a person or a group of such persons by issuing a single order. And then it goes on and just explains how that would all work out. That's from the bill itself, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? And you wonder why we call it the dumbest bill in America? I mean, this guy literally has a bill, A416 in the state of New York, in the 2021-22 session, Nick Perry from New York City, that basically allows the governor under a health emergency to say to you, we don't trust you to do the right thing when you get a communicable disease like COVID. We're going to just force you out of your house and we're going to detain you for as long as we want with no check and balance in sight. In fact, the bill even goes on to say that you can't even argue with the state. You can't even go to court for like 60 days. So, because I guess, their assumption is, well, since you have a communicable disease, if you go to court, the judge might get it or whatever. This is totalitarian stuff. This is totalitarian. So we have David Smith of Altus, which is a big cable company in New York. And he has a 219 interview. It's actually 2 years ago when he did this interview with Assemblyman Nick Perry. And the Assemblyman Nick Perry, of course, is the one that put in this stupid bill, this dumbest bill in America. And we want to give you a feel of this guy because, we just want you to know what Nick Perry is about. We have a clip on this, and here it is.
Again, the Democrats now have firm control of the Senate and the House, as well as the big chair.
Full control.
Full control. What is that going to mean from the interest of you and your constituents in getting things done?
Oh, very promising and extremely optimistic that very good progressive legislation that's been beat around and hanging on the table for so long, we'll finally get to pass them, and then it'll be up to the governor.
So in 2019, so literally 2 years ago, because we're in 2021 now, that interview took place where the Republicans lost complete control of the state of New York in the assembly. So Republicans didn't have the lower house or the upper house in New York State, nor did they have the governorship. So Democrats were in complete control, and David Smith of Altus, the cable company, is interviewing Nick Perry there, where he says, well, now that you're in control of everything, what are you going to do? So in that same interview, Assemblyman Nick Perry is asked about, well, you're in control, so what's your priorities? You're going to love what his priorities are, which tells you where this guy's really coming from. And here is the clip.
So this session, I want to focus on another progressive piece of legislation. Senator Zelna Myrie and myself will be pushing the Prisoner Minimum Wage Act.
So, the Prisoner Minimum Wage Act is what his priority is. You can imagine what that bill is, of course, just by its title. And so David Smith of the Altus, the cable company, again, he's the interviewer, asks Nick Perry, well, what are you trying to achieve for the prisoners? This minimum wage act, what are you trying to achieve? So we have that clip, and here it is.
What are you seeking for those prisoners?
Well, slavery, we believe, was abolished under the 13th Amendment, but it specifically explains that if you are a prisoner, if you're incarcerated, you are property of the state, and for you, slavery continues because the state can subject you to work with no pay under any condition. And in New York State, prisoners who are working or who are forced to do work that otherwise would have been paid for by the state, they earn up to 10 cents an hour.
So let's get this straight. Nick Perry, his priority, now that Democrats are in control in the state of New York, 100%, his priority is the Prisoner Minimum Wage Act. He wants prisoners to receive a minimum wage while they are incarcerated, because he calls prisoners slaves. Yet this is the same guy that has the dumbest bill in America of 2021, at least so far, whereby he wants there to be forced COVID detention camps. I mean, I'm sorry, they're forced detention camps. Isn't that also a type of slavery, at least using his logic? I'm just saying. I mean, who are these idiots that get elected that put in these bills in the state of New York? And look, here's my takeaway from this dumbest bill, and I was talking to our assistant producer, Chris, earlier about this, and that is, if you ever want an argument of why a single-payer system in the United States is a bad idea, right? If you ever want an argument of why government should not be in full 100% control in a single-payer system of your health care, if you ever wonder about that, this bill and the coronavirus issue and the pandemic in the United States should give you great pause of why you should always oppose a single-payer government-controlled system. Because under the guise of a health emergency, governments, states across the country, some more than others, obviously, have decided to just lock everybody down. They've shut businesses down, but they've kept the big businesses open, like Walmart. They've forced you to basically, in some cases, lose your house or lose your job. And then now they're saying in New York, well, now that we've done all of that under the guise of a health emergency, now we have the right to forcibly remove you from your house and detain you indefinitely until such time as we decide that you are no longer a risk to your fellow men. I mean, that is why I have always, look, great example, right? COVID, 2020, the pandemic, and now 2021, great example of why you don't want the government in control of your health care. Because government can then deny you your health care unless you do what they tell you to do. Or they can, potentially just let you die like they did in New York, where Governor Cuomo sent people with COVID to nursing homes. I mean, New York, if you live in New York now and you have a choice, you truly have a choice of where you want to live, and you are even a moderately Republican, if you're middle of the road, let's say, or you're a Republican, you need to get the heck out of New York, and you need to do it as fast as you possibly can. And you know what I hope that you do? I hope that you move to places like Michigan or Pennsylvania or Wisconsin. And I hope you do that so that we can have the Republicans in New York move out en masse and move to the nearby states that are more similar to the areas where they grew up, where we can regain control of those states in the Electoral College and finally restore the American Republic. Because this dumbest bill by Nick Perry demonstrates to us the dangerous tipping point that we're at in America with a single-payer system, as well as forcing people to do what they want you to do because they control your health care. I mean, I just don't understand why no one is actually seeing this. And oh, by the way, I got to add this, okay? So Politico magazine talked about this bill, this dumbest bill in America, and they just put out an article. It was just a day or two ago. And the Politico tries to explain away how stupid and dangerous this bill is. Here's what Politico says. The article is titled, "Long Dormant Assembly Bill Becomes Subject of Conspiracy Theories." Okay? Long Dormant Assembly Bill becomes subject of a conspiracy theories. And here's what it says. The vast majority of the 20,000 or so bills introduced in the state legislature of New York every session never wind up being debated, receive no votes, and become little more than pieces of paper that are reintroduced with little thought for however many years or decades the sponsor winds up serving. In other words, the Politico magazine is saying that Nick Perry, who put in this ridiculous bill, had introduced it before. And really, there was really no thought in putting the bill in because, you know, he's put it in before and no one was really outraged until this year that he put the bill in. Well, that's because the media doesn't report about these things. In fact, that's the whole reason why we're doing this podcast, because there is no reporting whatsoever about any of this crazy stuff. And his bill probably didn't seem that dangerous until it started actually getting legs this year because of COVID. And because of the fact that Cuomo, the governor of New York, is all about consolidating as much power as he can. Do you think for 1 minute, if you said to Governor Cuomo, "Hey, Governor, you know, you're telling me to shut down my restaurant? I refuse to shut it down. I refuse to lock down. I need to make a living. No one should come in my restaurant that's really concerned." Do you think for 1 minute that if this bill passed, that Governor Cuomo wouldn't say to you, "I'm going to forcibly remove you from your house and, you know, detain you under the public health risk that you have given to the people of New York"? Folks, this is why the bill is dangerous. This is why the bill is dangerous. And you don't just put a bill in because you can. You actually have to think about not only the positive effects of the bill, but also you have to think of the problems the bill might actually create. But that's not what Democrats do. They think more legislation just makes us so much safer as a society. And that is the dumbest bill in America, forced COVID detention camps in New York. And that is it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Parler, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.